G'day and welcome back to the 4D channel and our first of our quick tip videos. Let's go straight to the rear axle and find out what we're going to do. Righto, so you're removing the whole rear axle, you're removing all the brakes, all the seals, and you want to change your bearing. But the inner race bearing on your rear axle is really well and truly in there. And you don't have a bearing puller or the right tools to get it out. We're going to show you how to remove that inner bearing race with just a welder. Right, just a quick clean up just so we don't get as dirty trying to pull all this apart. So what we're going to do now is show you an easy way of trying to get out our seal and our inner bearing. If you've got an internal bearing puller, well, you've hit a home run. There's not much to it. Put the internal bearing puller on, screw it up, and it'll pull the whole bearing out. If you don't, it's going to be quite difficult to get out this internal bearing, but I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to get it out. First thing I want to do is just pull out this lip seal. Now I've got a little slide hammer here. Now, this didn't cost much at all, and you can pretty much make your own slide hammer. It's pretty much a tube, and you can use whatever bit of heavy metal with a hole in it to bang things out with. All I did was weld on a nut to some multi-grips, and this here comes in handy for a whole stack of stuff. So you can pull out dints, you can pull out seals, you can pull out bearings. So all we're going to do now is, like we've done on many cases before to pull out bearings, drill 2 holes, put screws in, and just bang it out with the slide hammer. If you don't have a slide hammer, just get some multi-grips or some pliers and just knock it out, and that seal will come out fairly easy actually. These are just little wood screws. There's nothing special about them at all. Use any screws you like really. Do one side, come over to the other side. I don't have an internal bearing puller big enough to pull this out. I've got a really small one for small bearings, but it's not big enough to grab hold of this. So what I'm actually going to do is the internal cage of this bearing, we're going to rip it out and all the rollers out, so it's just the outer sleeve of the bearing. Then we're going to run a bead of weld around the whole inside of that bearing, and what that's actually going to do is shrink the metal. I know it sounds strange, heat normally expands metal. It's actually going to pull that bearing in, then we'll be able to knock it out. So we're just going to grab hold of the lip here with our multi-grips. You can see we're starting to damage that inside cage, and that's exactly what we want. We want to rip that inside cage completely out. Just like that. That's the inside cage of the bearing. Most of these rollers have already fallen out. Just knock the last little bits of rollers out. So knock all those little rollers out. Now, all we're going to do is clean the inside of that up so that we can weld inside it and hopefully knock that out. Righto, so we've got a bit of oil and stuff inside there. Now that's obvious because our diff's full of oil, but we need to clean all that out before we can put some weld down, otherwise the weld just won't stick. So this is where our R1 comes into its own. Now this stuff is a multi-purpose lubricant. It can be used on so many applications. It's like a full-on miracle spray. It's so awesome, I love it. But the best thing about this stuff, unlike most multi-purpose lubricant sprays, this stuff is non-flammable. So that's a big key when I'm doing stuff like this. So for instance, if you want to spray this just down on a workbench and you don't want it to rust, but you also use that workbench for welding, well, you need a non-flammable spray. So this stuff will prevent rust as well as penetrate into things and work stuff out, as well as clean up any oil and residue and stuff. So we're going to spray it in here, clean all this up so we can get ready to weld. And being non-flammable, we're not going to have any danger of any flashback or any dramas like that. You can see it's sort of pretty much washed all that oil out of there, prepping the surface ready to be welded on. So as well as cleaning all the oil and dirt and everything out of where we want to weld and get it in, being a penetrative oil, it also has its penetration properties, so it's actually going to get in underneath that bearing and also help it come out. Let's clean that up beautifully now. I'm going to take my beanie off for this one. It's getting cold. Righto, so now that we've done that, I can actually see it's actually shrunk a little bit. So we had no dramas because we had the R1. So there's nothing that was going to catch on fire. If that was any other type of multi-lubricant, there'd be flames coming out of there to get a bit of flashback. It could be quite dangerous. So the R1 is really coming to its own there. I've got one of the old leaf pins and I just cut that down. And we're going to put that in the inside of the bearing, put on the slide hammer, and hopefully it'll knock straight out. Now it's okay if you don't have a MIG welder, but you do have a stick welder. Another trick is you can get your stick, you can weld around halfway, weld it around, and then just turn your welder off. That way you've got a stick hanging out. Put a new stick on, weld around the other halfway, turn your welder off. Those two sticks will stick there, and you could even use them to pull out your old internal bearing. Moment of truth. Oh, hang on a second. I might not even need the slide hammer. That has nearly come out all the way without me doing anything. How good is that? So we only need the slide hammer for the last little bit. Look at that. It's an old leaf pin. Now that'll be pretty hot. Make sure you got gloves on. And that bearing, it almost slid out on its own. So a combination of our R1 and our welding made the job so much easier. I can guarantee you if you try doing that without welding and you just try to get it with a slide hammer, you are going to have a stack of problems. So it's a really good little trick to learn. Alright, so I've just cleaned all up inside of here. There was tiny little bits of slag and stuff in there, but we cleaned all that up. Now we've got a little bit of a benefit on our side because it's so cold here at the moment. That's warm because we've just welded it, so that's great. And our bearing, it's been sitting in the shed all night. It's quite cold. Because this is warm, it's hopefully expanded the metal just a fraction. Because our bearing's cold, been sitting in the shed all night, hopefully it'll be a little bit smaller and we'll be able to get it on. Now we've got a little ring that was at the back of that bearing. I'm just going to slip that back in place. Get our brand new bearing. Just sit that there. Just going to slight tap with just a copper hammer. Using our old bearing that we knocked out, I've cut a slit in it like I have with every other bearing. And we can use that to knock in our new bearing. That way we're not going to hit on this and we're not going to damage anything. Quick spray with some penetrant. Righto, that's home. Exactly the same thing with our new seal. Again, we can sort of press that in with our fingers just a little bit. Same trick with our bearing. Just tap that seal in. Perfect. Righto, just like that. How easy was that? New bearing and new seal, all replaced, ripped out the old one. Who would have ever thought? A little bit of non-flammable penetrant oil and a welder. Pop it out, put the new one straight back in. Righto, thanks for watching our first tips and tricks video. A lot more to come, and until next time, take care of yourselves.